There are controversies in sports that you have to dig for. You need anonymous sources, locker room whispers, someone with an agenda, and a phone full of screenshots. And then there are moments like this one, where everything you need to understand exactly what happened is sitting right there in plain sight, on camera, with audio, in front of thousands of people inside a professional arena. No digging required, no unnamed sources, just a referee, a basketball player, and a technical foul that the entire sports world spent the next 48 hours talking about. On June 22, 2026, the Indiana Fever beat the Phoenix Mercury. Caitlin Clark dropped 24 points and 9 assists. By any measure, it was a dominant individual performance from one of the most watched athletes in professional basketball right now. And yet the moment everyone is still replaying has nothing to do with any of those numbers. It has to do with what happened when Clark walked over to referee Gerda Datling and asked a simple question: what was the technical foul for? Gatling's answer stopped everyone cold. Clapping. The technical foul, Gatling told her, was for clapping her hands. Let that land for a second. A professional referee officiating a professional basketball game issued a technical foul to one of the most prominent players in the sport, not for throwing a ball in frustration, not for screaming at an official, not for making contact with anyone, for clapping. And the moment Clark heard that explanation, something shifted. Not into rage, not into a meltdown, into something sharper than either of those. She looked at Gatling and said that if clapping was the standard, then the officials simply did not like competitive basketball. Then she walked away. And then she went to the post-game podium and said everything she had just held back. Clark did not arrive at that microphone looking to be diplomatic. She had just won a basketball game, and she was standing in front of reporters already mentally calculating how many technicals she had left before a suspension became unavoidable. 5 technicals in less than half a season. 3 more and she sits. And the one that just pushed her to 5 was, by her own word and by the word of the referee who issued it, for clapping. She said it was ridiculous. She said it plainly, without dressing it up. And then she said something that cut straight to the core of the problem. She told reporters she would love to hear from the league directly, officially, on the record, explaining the reasoning behind why she received a technical foul in that situation when nobody else on the court did. Not a statement through a PR department, not a league spokesperson with a carefully worded non-answer, a real explanation. Because if the standard that night was clapping equals a technical foul, then that standard should have applied to everyone on the court equally. It did not. Clark got the whistle. Nobody else did. She also said something that is going to stay with anyone who follows this league closely. She told the room that fans should go ahead and mark a game on the calendar now, because at the rate the technicals are being issued, the suspension is not a question of if, it is a question of when. A player who just delivered a near-flawless performance, who just helped her team win, was standing at a press conference podium doing the math on her own upcoming punishment. That is the situation the WNBA's officiating has created, and it did not start on June 22nd. To understand why this technical foul hit the way it did, you have to look at all 5 of them together, because none of them exist in isolation. The pattern is the story. The first one came during a delay of game sequence. Clark kicked a ball that had gone out of bounds, trying to redirect it back toward the scorer's table. It bounced the wrong way, rolled down the court, and a bench technical was issued. Most analysts watching that play live called it borderline at best. Not a defining moment, but a whistle that raised an eyebrow or two.
The second came and went without too much noise. An emotional moment in a close game, a reaction to a call, a technical that Clark herself later acknowledged was probably coming. She has done that more than once this season, stood at a podium and said clearly that a particular technical was on her, that she let her emotions get the better of her and accepted the consequence. That kind of accountability matters when you start looking at the full picture, because it tells you Clark is not out here crying about every single whistle. She picks her spots. She knows the difference between a call she earned and a call that should not have happened. The third one is where things started to get genuinely uncomfortable. During a game against the Atlanta Dream in June 2026, Clark received her 5th foul of the game after defending Jordan Canada on a drive. The call made her jaw drop. She turned immediately toward the bench, eyes wide, body language screaming, looking directly at head coach Stephanie White and urging a challenge. The challenge never came. The whistle stood. Clark's frustration exploded, and White sat on the bench without ever pulling the trigger on a review that could have shifted the game's momentum entirely. It is important to hold on to that detail because it comes back. The fourth technical foul brought a moment this league had never quite seen before. Clark walked to the post-game podium and, instead of speaking in comfortable generalities about officiating concerns, called out a referee by name, Tyler Merkovich. She said the officiating in that game was not acceptable, and she wanted it on record. Naming officials directly from a press conference podium is not something players do casually. It is a line most athletes spend their careers carefully avoiding. Clark crossed it because she felt the situation had reached a point where vague complaints were no longer enough. And then came number 5, the clapping technical. Fourth quarter, obvious emotional moment. Clark's hands come together, and Gerda Gatling reached for her whistle. 5 technicals, 5 different games, 5 different situations, all pointing in the same direction. When the same player keeps finding herself at the center of calls that analysts, fans, and even the league itself eventually questions, coincidence stops being a satisfying explanation. After the game, reporters turned to Stephanie White. The questions were straightforward. Her star player had just publicly called a technical foul ridiculous. Her star player was 3 technicals from a suspension. Her star player had delivered one of the more pointed post-game statements in recent Fever history. What did the head coach have to say? White kept her answers measured. She acknowledged that as a group, the team needed to be able to have their moment and then regroup. She said the officials did a good job getting things under control after the situation escalated. She said the team needed to play with what she called poison composure, emotional but controlled. And that was more or less it. The internet had thoughts. One comment circulated so widely it ended up being quoted in multiple sports coverage pieces. People were still waiting for Stephanie White to get a technical foul for sticking up for her players, specifically Caitlin Clark. That line went viral not because it was the most sophisticated piece of sports commentary, but because it captured something that a lot of people watching were already feeling. When your player is at a podium calculating her own suspension out loud, a measured response from the sideline is not what the moment calls for. And this was not the first time. Go back to the Atlanta Dream game. Clark turned to that bench and asked, with her whole body, for her coach to fight for her. White stayed put. The challenge that could have taken the pressure off her best player never came. Coaches make strategic decisions about challenges. That is not in dispute. But there is a difference between strategic restraint and leaving your player standing alone in the middle of the court while the frustration builds. Clark has now experienced that feeling more than once this season, and the locker room will remember it whether it gets discussed publicly or not. What is emerging is a dynamic that any team sport analyst would flag as a quiet problem. The player is fighting her own battles loudly and effectively, while the coaching staff manages the situation from a careful, controlled distance. Clark is growing into her voice, naming referees, demanding league reviews, standing at podiums and saying exactly what she means. That is a player who has decided that if nobody else is going to go to bat for her loudly enough, she will do it herself. That is not a sign of a player out of control. It is a sign of a player who has stopped waiting for backup that is not arriving.
The on-court exchange between Clark and Gatling is the moment this entire story hinges on, and it is worth examining closely because it tells you everything about how Clark handled herself when most players would have come apart. She did not storm over, she walked. She did not demand or threaten, she asked. She went to the official calmly, not happy, not hiding that she was not happy, and asked for an explanation. Gatling gave her one. The technical was for clapping and instigating. Instigating. Clark heard that word and responded directly. If clapping is instigating, then you just do not like competitive basketball.
That is just facts. That is just reality. Think about what it takes to come up with that answer in that moment, not in a press conference where you've had 20 minutes to collect your thoughts, but in the middle of a game, standing in front of the referee who just hit you with a technical while the crowd is watching and the clock is ticking, and your team needs you to stay locked in. She heard a justification that did not hold up to any reasonable scrutiny, and she responded to it with clarity and precision. She did not call the official names. She did not make a scene. She made an argument, and it was a good one. Clapping emphatically after a contested foul call is not instigating. It is a reaction. It is what competitors do when they believe they have been wronged, and they are expressing that belief through their body, rather than a string of words the league would have to deal with. Every sport has it. Every arena sees it every single night. The idea that this specific action in this specific game from this specific player was the thing worth issuing a technical foul over is something the league itself ultimately could not defend. When you step back and look at the two explanations available for what has been happening to Caitlin Clark in the officiating department this season, neither of them reflects well on this league. The first possibility is that some referees have developed a specific bias against Clark, that they are holding her to a standard they are not applying to the other 20 or so players on the floor at any given time. That would mean the officiating in the WNBA has become personal. It would mean a player's history, her profile, maybe the noise that follows her into arenas, is affecting the judgment of the people who are supposed to be neutral arbiters of the game. That's a serious accusation. It's also one that the pattern of calls this season makes genuinely difficult to dismiss outright. The second possibility is somehow more troubling because it does not require anyone to be deliberately targeting Clark. It only requires that some officials in this league are uncomfortable with the way she plays, the passion, the emotion, the visible competitiveness that comes out in clapping and in body language and in the fire that makes her must-watch television. If that's what's getting whistled, if referees are treating Clark's competitive energy as a disruption to be managed rather than a feature of great basketball to be allowed space, then this is not a Clark problem at all. It's a league culture problem. It's officials using their whistles to sand down the exact qualities that are driving the WNBA's growth. And that would mean the league is slowly, call by call, working against itself. Neither answer is comfortable. Both of them deserve a serious response from the people running this league. The WNBA reviewed the technical. After Clark's statement, after the footage spent 2 straight days being replayed across every sports platform on the internet, after the conversation reached a volume that made ignoring it impossible, the league looked at what Gerda Gatling had done and made a decision. They rescinded it. That word is doing an enormous amount of work in this story, and it's worth sitting with it properly. Rescinding a technical foul is not a routine administrative correction. It's not the league quietly updating a box score. It's a formal acknowledgement that the call should not have been made. It's the WNBA putting in writing that one of its officials stood on a professional court and issued a punishment so far outside the boundaries of reasonable officiating that the league itself had to erase it from the record. Which brings up a detail that says a lot about the kind of player Clark actually is, separate from all the noise. When she felt she earned a technical this season, she said so. She has stood at that podium and told reporters that yes, that one was on her, that she crossed a line and the official was right to call it. She has done that multiple times. She is not a player who blanket rejects every whistle that goes against her. She is a player who knows the difference between accountability and being wronged. When the league rescinded the clapping technical, it confirmed that her read on the situation, the one she delivered at a press conference podium hours before the review even began, was correct. 4 technicals now. The threshold for suspension is 8. The back half of the season is still ahead. The rescission matters. The documentation matters. The fact that the league was forced into the corner of publicly acknowledging a bad call matters. But here is the part of this story that none of those resolutions actually fix. The pattern that produced 5 technicals in the first place is still there. The referees assigned to fever games are the same referees, the standard being applied to Clark when she reacts emotionally on a basketball floor has not been formally addressed or corrected in any way that would change how the next game gets called. The league wiped one call off the books. It did not wipe out the reality that Clark is sitting at 4 technicals before the midpoint of a season that still has plenty of games left to play. If the officiating does not shift, if the same approach to her emotional expression continues, then the suspension conversation is not over, it is simply paused. The math is still the math. 4 technicals, 4 more before she sits, and a pattern that has produced one questionable call after another already this season. The fans who are tracking this closely understand what the numbers mean, and they are watching to see whether the league's decision to rescind one call was the beginning of a genuine correction or simply the move required to make the story go away for a news cycle. There's a version of this story that you could tell strictly as a sports controversy. Referee makes a bad call, the league corrects it, player gets her technical removed, everybody moves on. That version is clean and it wraps up neatly, and it misses the actual point entirely. Caitlin Clark is not just a basketball player navigating a rough officiating stretch. She is the reason the numbers this league is currently posting exist. The arenas that were half full 3 years ago are now selling out months in advance. The national broadcast deals that did not exist before she walked into this league now exist because of the audiences she brings with her. The conversation about women's basketball at the national level, on mainstream sports television, in barbershops and offices and group chats that never used to discuss the WNBA, that conversation is happening because of what Clark represents and what she has built in a very short period of time. That growth is real. The cultural moment the WNBA is sitting inside right now is real. And it is fragile in exactly the way that all good things are fragile when the people managing them begin making decisions that do not protect what they have. Issuing a technical foul for clapping, having to rescind it 2 days later, allowing a coaching staff to give measured press conference answers while the league's most important player schedules her own suspension out loud. These are not isolated management failures. They are small cracks in something that took years to build and can erode faster than anyone wants to admit. Caitlin Clark did what she has done every time this season when the moment has asked something of her. She said what needed to be said, she named who needed to be named, she asked for accountability on the record, and she got it, and then she went and won the basketball game. The technical got rescinded, the pattern got documented, the questions got asked publicly in a way the league cannot pretend it did not hear. What happens next is on the WNBA. The referees working fever games know what is being watched. The front office knows what the review revealed. Stephanie White knows what her player needed from the bench in moments that tested them both this season. All of that is now part of the record. The fans built something real by showing up for this league in numbers nobody predicted. They are paying attention to every single thing being done with what they helped create. And unlike some of the officiating decisions we have watched this season, that attention is not going anywhere.